haven't arrived, the Senate will come to order. Would ask that unauthorized visitors exit the chamber at this time as the Senate is coming to order. Chair recognizes the Distinguished Rules Committee Chairman, the Senator from the 53rd.
Good morning, Mr. President. A sad day in history. This date in 1983, Herschel Walker left the University of Georgia. A truly sad day. The journal's been read and found to be correct.
Herschel left, Herschel right, Herschel up the middle. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? Reading of journal is dispensed with. Is there objection? Confirmation of journal? Chair is none. The journal is confirmed. All senators having bills and resolutions introduced, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 476 by Senator Ligon III and others. The bill entitled Enactment in Chapter 11, Title 15 of the OCGA relating to juvenile
Judiciary Committee.
Senate Bill 477 by Senator Parent of the 42nd. A bill entitled Enact to authorize the government.
State and local governmental operations.
Senate Bill 478 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others. A bill entitled Enact to create the city of
State
Brooklyn.
and local governmental operations.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
First reading and reference of House bills and resolutions.
House Bill 695 represents episode of the 144th and others. A bill entitled Enactment in Code Section 4286 of the OCGA relating to special license.
Natural resources.
House Bill 714 by Representative
Public
Rogers.
safety.
House Bill 743 by Representative Clark of the 98th and others.
Education.
House Bill 785 by Representative Nix of the 69th and others.
Natural resources.
House Bill 787 by Representative Hilton of the
Education and youth.
House Bill 814 by Representative Williams of the 145th and others. A bill entitled Enactment.
Slogo General.
House Bill 286 by Representative Cobble of the 111th and others. A bill entitled Enactment.
Public safety.
House Bill 835 by Representative Lott of the 122nd and others.
Finance.
House Bill 840 by Representative Hitchens of the 164th.
Veterans.
House Bill 853 by Representative Dempsey of the 13th and others.
Education and youth.
House Bill 876 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others. A bill entitled Enactment.
Agriculture.
House Bill 907 by Representative Fleming of the 121st and others. A bill entitled Enactment.
Judiciary.
House Bill 918 by Representative Registration of the 104th and others. A bill entitled
Finance
Enactment.
Committee.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Secretary will read reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations General has had arguments the following legislation instructing board with the same impact of the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 453 do pass by substitute. Summaries of Kirk of the 13th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Education and Youth has had arguments the final legislation instructing board with the same impact of the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 456 to pass. Senate Bill 457 to pass. Summarized Senator Tippins of Senator Wilkinson of the 50th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Rules has had arguments the following legislation instructing board with the same impact of the Senate following recommendation. Senate Resolution 681 to pass. Summarized Senator Moles of the 53rd. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs has had arguments the following legislation instructing board with the same impact of the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 451 to pass by substitute. Summarized Senator Wilkinson of the 50th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has arguments the following legislation instructing board with the same back to the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 359 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 382 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 437 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 444 to pass. Senate Bill Resolution 761 to pass. And my Senator Northam in the 45th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary has had arguments and following legislation with the same back to the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 461 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 431 to pass. Senate Bill 436 to pass. Senate Bill 39 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 335 to pass. Senate Bill 2 and 36 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 3 and 14 to pass by substitute. Senate Resolution 902 to pass by substitute. Senator Stone of the 23rd. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Transportation has had arguments the following legislation with the same back to the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 386 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 460 to pass by substitute. Senator Beach of the 21st. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities that are consideration of the following legislation instructing board with the same back to the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 232 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 425 to pass by substitute. Senate Bill 426 to pass by substitute. Summarized Senator Ginn of the 47th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism has had consideration of the following legislation instructing board with the same back to the Senate following recommendation. Senate Bill 463 to pass by substitute. Summarized Senator Dugan of the 30th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Ethics has had consideration of final legislation to report back to the Senate for recommendation. Senate Bill 403 to pass by substitute. Senator Burke of the 11th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment has had consideration of final legislation to report this back to the Senate for recommendation. Senate Bill 404 to pass by substitute. Senate Resolution 778 to pass. Senate Bill 450 to pass. Senator Harper of the 7th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations General has had consideration of final legislation to report the same back to the Senate for recommendation. Senate Bill 414 to pass. Senate Bill 430 to pass. Senate Bill 264 to pass by substitute. Senator Kirk of the 13th. And Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services had a consideration of the following legislation instructing board of the same Baptist Senate for recommendation. Senate Resolution 772 do pass by substitute. Senate Resolution 865 do pass. Senate Bill 318 do pass by substitute. Senate by Senator Thurman the 45th. That concludes the order.
Secretary will read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 228 by Senator McCoon, 29th, motor vehicles, criminal offense and minimum fines for improper operation of an authorized emergency or law enforcement vehicle provide. Senate Bill 350 by Senator Walker, 20th, and others, notice of information practices by institution or agent, policy renewal to comport with federal law, update notice practices requirements. Senate Bill 4 and 6 by Senator Strickland, 17th, and others, Georgia Long-Term Care Background Check Program and Act, public safety promote. Senate Bill 4 and 7 by Senator Strickland, 17th, and others, criminal justice system, comprehensive reform for offenders provide. Senate Bill 411 by Senator Jackson, 2nd, and others, Georgia Commission on African American History and Culture creates. Senate Bill 432 by Senator Albers, 56th, and others, Georgia Tax Credit Business Case Act. Senate Bill 435 by Senator Beach, 21st, and others, school buses, civil monetary penalties regarding violations of the duties of a driver, enforcement revised. Senate Bill 443 by Senator Stone, 23rd. Security deposit, list of existing defects and of damage before and after a tendency, provisions clarified. Senate Bill 445 by Senator Gooch, the 51st, and others, Department of Transportation, standards for contract bidding process, and award procedure provides. Senate Bill 446 by Senator Hopper, the 7th, abandoned motor vehicles, motor vehicle or trailer becomes an abandoned motor vehicle, revise the times. Senate Bill 452 by Senator Stone, 23rd, and us, criminal procedure and penal institutions, police officer to take certain actions, verification that a suspect is an illegal alien required. Senate Bill 458 by Senator Wilkinson to the 50th, and others, ad valorem taxation, conditions for family-owned farmed entities, discontinued qualifying use of bona fide conservation use property, provide. Senate Resolution 745 by Senator Miller the 40th, and others, Robert H. Bob Bell interchanges DeKalb County dedicate. Senate Resolution 752 by Senator Harbin the 16th, and others, U.S. Congress repeal the Johnson Amendment to the Internal Revenue Code, encourage. Senate Resolution 794 by Senator Miller the 49th, and others, joint Georgia, North Carolina, and Georgia, Tennessee Boundary Line Commission create. Senate Resolution 821 by Senator Martin the 9th, and others, Cybersecurity and Information Technology Innovation Corridor, recognize Augusta, Logistics Technology Innovation Corridor, recognize Savannah. Senate Resolution 832 by Senator Moulds the 53rd, Senate Study Committee on Risks Associated with Kratom create. House Bill 85 by Representative Powell the 171st, and others, ad valorem tax, methodology used to establish forest land fair market value, revised. House Bill 694 by Representative Harold the 106th, and others, motor fuel tax, electronic filing of certain reports required. House Resolution 51 by Representative Powell the 171st, and others, forest land fair market value, prescribed methodology, remove CA. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize Senator from the 56th, if you would give him your attention.
Senators, if you could give me your attention for just a moment. For the last 8 years, I've been honored to serve in office, and almost every time my anniversary falls on a day we're in legislative session. And today is my 25th anniversary, and I have my lovely bride, Carrie, with me. When we serve in legislative session, sometimes we don't even know if I'll get to take her out to dinner. It depends on how long the day goes. So I'd ask for a little brevity today, if you don't mind. But at all the things I've done in my life, it was certainly the best decision I ever made. So, sweetie, happy anniversary. I love you.
I don't know if you noticed, but when he went over to kiss his wife, I guess after 25 years, those kisses get a lot shorter. Is that the case? Anyway, congratulations. That's awesome. Very proud of you guys. Thank you. Now time for the morning roll call. Time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the senator from the 1st.
Mr. President, I'd like to excuse the senator from the 37th and the senator from the 13th for business outside the Capitol.
37th and 13th. Without objection, the two senators will be excused. Chair recognizes the majority leader, the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. After us all being thrown under the bus so eloquently by the senator from the 56th, I would
I'd like to excuse the senator from the 14th for business outside of the Capitol.
14th, without objection, senator from the 14th will be excused. Chair recognizes senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 38th, business outside the the Capitol.
38th, without objection, senator from the 38th will be excused. Chair now recognizes senator from the 51st. Nope. 15th.
President, I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 5th.
5th, without objection, senator from the 5th will be excused. Chair recognizes senator from the 24th. 24th.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 23rd for business outside the Capitol.
43rd.
23rd.
23rd. 23rd, without objection, senator from the 23rd will be excused. Chair recognizes senator from the 43rd.
Ask consent to excuse the senator from the 44th for business outside of the Capitol.
44th, without objection, senator from the 44th will be excused. Chair recognizes senator from the 40th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to exclude the senator from the 37th District, and he is doing fine recovering.
Thank you for that report. He's already been excused. Chair recognizes senator 28th.
I just got a question. Does the senator from the 56th need to be excused for a little business outside the Capitol?
I think Ronnie Millsap said that sometimes you have daydreams about night things in the middle of the afternoon. Just quoting a song, of course. Any other motions to excuse? Senators, please signify your presence by voting the A switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for our morning devotion. Time for our morning devotion. Would ask that all senators please take your seats and cease all audible conversation at this time as we are preparing for our morning devotion. It is now my distinct honor to recognize the distinguished senator from Columbus, the senator from the 15th, and for the purpose of leading us in our pledge and introducing our chaplain of the day. Senator.
I want to thank you, Mr. President, if you join me in salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. Good morning, members of the Senate. It gives me a great deal of pleasure this morning to introduce this special chaplain of the day, Dr. Vida Pickett Neal. who was calling to the ministry at age 17 in the city of Detroit, Michigan, while under the anointed leadership of Pastor Butler. She is a gospel singer, songwriter, playwright, and the author of the book called I Never Had a Golden Spoon, and an ordained minister. Dr. Neal is a graduate and has an honorary doctorate degree from Shekinah Glory Bible College and Theological Seminary in Hyderabad, India, and also an associate in Christian Studies and a bachelor in church ministry from the Shure Foundation Theological Institute. Dr. Neal is the daughter of one of the greatest soul singers of all time, R&B soul singer Wilson Wicked Pickett, who made the song In the Midnight Hour, Mustang Sally, and Land of a Thousand Dances. At an early age, Dr. Pickett learned from her mother and father, who were both gospel singers, that God should always be first, and that commitment, sacrifice, and hard work are the keys to success. Born and raised in Detroit, Dr. Neal first realized in the third grade that music was in her heart and her passion, but she didn't realize the Lord was preparing her voice not for the glory of man or to please men, but to deliver peace and comfort to the hearts of those she would meet and give to God all the glory and all the honor. Dr. Pickett Neal is a devoted wife to her husband, Sergeant First Class William D. Neal, who is serving in the United States Army, and she has two daughters, Kentika and Kira, and a proud grandmother. Evangelist Neal has a passion to spread God's love around the world. She's traveled to places in Egypt and also parts of India, spreading God's love through preaching, teaching, and allowing God to use her and to lay hands on the sick and those in need of healing. This anointed woman of God understands the meaning of the power of God and the anointing mantle of leadership that He has placed on her life to reach out to those in need. She's also offered her services and support in the countries that God has led her to visit and has become a leader for what a disciple of Christ should be. This humanitarian last visited Hyderabad, India in March and was able to minister to many who needed to hear the word of God. She was able to observe that everyday life, like if those who lived in those communities that she visited, including leprosy, villages containing people suffering from that malady, women's and men's prisons, and also needy orphan children, instantly moved by her praise to God. This woman of God has been especially touched by how everyone is so welcoming and interested in listening to her share her knowledge of Christ. She always says that each time she goes overseas ministering and preaching, it is a life-changing experience and is often bringing tears to her eyes to see the yearning for God and His power. Dr. Pickett is always humbled and honored to be in the midst of God's movement and enjoy serving and giving her time to the homeless, volunteering, feeding in our community, soup kitchens, Columbus Hospice, and working at youth risk centers and for those who are dear to God's heart. Truly, the Spirit of God is upon her because He has anointed her to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent her to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery for the sight of the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Luke 4:18-19. This is her God-given mission. I introduce to you Dr. Vida Pickett Neal and my cousin to bring the word of God.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
First, I would like to thank Senator Ed Harbison and Lieutenant Governor Casey Gagel and everyone here for giving me this opportunity to stand before you today. I would like to really actually share what God has really actually placed upon my heart to share with you today. In the book of Psalms, 133, verse 1. It says, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for the brethren to dwell together in unity." It is so important that we stand in unity together. We are to work together to be able to do the things that God has called us to do. Each and every person here, God has placed a responsibility upon your life to make right decisions. To make right decisions for not only the people, but for the community. And when God placed this responsibility on you, he knew that you were capable of this position. But one thing that I have really, learned in my leadership is that if it's no unity, there will never be success. And it's our job to work together, to have respect for each other in order to move forward. And so, as you today come together, realize something, that God placed you in this position, and you are responsible for what you have to do today. It is going to be a challenge today, I already know. And you're going to have to make some real serious choices. But it's nothing impossible for God. When you're doing what God has called you to do, and you do not lean to your own understanding, but you trust in God to make the right decision, especially in this time and in this age. When you see all the chaos going on, you have to have a clear mind and a clear focus on what you need to do today. So as you continue to make those decisions, as God said, don't trust your own understanding, but trust in me. Trust in what I have called you to do, because its lives are in your hands. It's decisions that you have to make. God said he will not put on you something that you cannot handle. He has equipped every one of you to do a job, and that job is to trust in him. So today, it is so important that you have respect for the decisions, because everybody is not going to have the same opinion, but we can respect that person's opinion and move forward to make right decisions today for the community, for the people, because it's going to be something today that God is going to use you today. And I know that all of you are going to be on one accord today, because I prayed before I came here, but I'm going to pray today that God would give you peace and strength today to do what you have to do today. Amen. So let's get into a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord. Father, in the name of Jesus, I thank you and praise you for each and every person here today. I thank you, Father, that you give them strength and you give them a peace of mind. I thank you and praise you, Father. Yes, they will not lean to their own understanding, but they are trust and rely on you today. Father, I thank you and praise you for the unity today. I thank you and praise you, Father, for what you're going to accomplish in this meeting today. Father, I thank you and praise you for each and every person, that they will respect and that they will do what you have called them to do. Father, you placed them in this office. I thank you and praise you, Father, as they go forward today, that they would accomplish everything that they need to accomplish. Father, not only did I lift them up, but I lift up their families. I lift up their commitment, their sacrifices today for all what you're going to do through them. Father, I thank you and praise you that it's done, because your word will not return unto you void, but shall accomplish that which is sent. And Father, I just give you all the glory, honor, and praise, because it's not about us, but it's all about you. And it's nothing impossible, Lord, that you can accomplish. I thank you and praise you, Father, for those that you place in authority, that they'll live a quiet and peaceable life. I lift up our nation. I lift up our capital. I lift up every staff member here, Father, that you use them the way you see fit. And Father, that let your will be done in this situation. Not our will, but your will. And I give you all the glory and the honor and the praise for what you're going to do today. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
You have a blessed day.
we would like to recognize our Doctor of the Day, and to do so, it's my honor and privilege to call upon the distinguished senator from the 6th.
Thank you. In this historical flu season, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Scott Swayze as our Doctor of the Day. Dr. Swayze is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. He is a partner of Pinnacle Orthopedics and sees patients at offices as Marietta, Woodstock, and Hiram. He graduated from Vanderbilt University before going to medical school at the University of Mississippi, and then he did his orthopedic residency here in Atlanta at Emory University. He lives in Atlanta and is married to his college sweetheart, Carol, a native Atlantan. They have 5 children and expects his first grandchild this summer. Join me in welcoming our Doctor of the Day, Dr. Scott Swayze.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, Mr. President and Senator. As an orthopedic surgeon, I'm not a flu expert, but certainly be happy to see you for anything downstairs. Thank you all so much for what you do, not only for physicians, for hospitals, but for the health and welfare of the citizens of Georgia. Thank you.
Well done, Scott. Appreciate it. Absolutely. If I could have the Senate's attention for just a moment, please. We have a special guest with us that we would like to recognize at this time. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 810 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others, a resolution honoring the life and memory of Scott Sullivan for other purposes, whereas the state of Georgia mourns the loss of one of its most distinguished citizens with the passing of Scott Sullivan on October 27, 2017. And whereas, by the example Scott Sullivan made of his life, he made this world a better place in which to live, and it is abundantly fitting and proper that he be appropriately recognized in celebration of his memory and legacy. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body honor the life and memory of Scott Sullivan and recognize his leadership and philanthropic contributions to the development community and beyond. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. So many of you had the opportunity to see Scott throughout the years as he was here in various roles, certainly with the Council for Quality Growth, a great leader, a great developer, a great visionary. And Steve, if I remember correctly, I think Saturday he would have been 48, if I recall. Taken way too young, but his impact obviously will be felt for many, many years, and it is a great honor to recognize the family here today on the loss of obviously a wonderful man. To speak to the resolution and recognize some of our special guests that are present with us. I see my good friend Wayne Mason back there as well. I now recognize the distinguished senator from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are here to honor the life of Scott Selig. I'm joined by his father, Steve Selig, and his mother, Janet Selig, and Amy and their children, Sam and Cooper. I first want to tell you a little bit about the Selig family. They've been in business for over 100 years. And let me tell you something, folks. The Selig family has their fingerprints all over this region and this state. The Selig family is an important part of this business community. But more importantly, they're part of this community. The giving back is part of the Selig culture. And Scott was a great community leader, and he believed in the culture of giving back. Scott lived by the philosophy, those who much is given, much is expected. And I think the best example of this is his involvement in the Ron Clark Academy. He was very active since the beginning of that school. He provided vision, and he loved watching those kids grow and prosper. When Scott was diagnosed with cancer, he didn't feel sorry for himself. He started a movement called Scott Strong to bring awareness to cancer and keep his friends updated. He battled his cancer with courage, grace, and strength. 3 months after his death, Scott Strong still has over 3,000 followers. I was fortunate to serve on the Council on Quality Growth Board with Scott, and we became very good friends. And for those of you that knew him, he loved clothes. He was dressed to the nines all the time. He looked like he had just stepped out of GQ, kind of like our Lieutenant Governor. And, but he loved to dress nice. In closing, I want to tell you, Scott loved his family. Sam and Cooper, he was so proud of you, and he loved both of y'all. Steve, you were his mentor. He just thought the world of you. And I want to say, in closing, Scott lived his life with purpose. He lived his life with passion and service to others. There's a Latin term that I think best describes Scott Seelig. It's called sic vos non vobis. It means, thus we labor, but not for ourselves. And that's what Scott Seelig was all about, laboring for others. So at this time, I would like to call on Steve Seelig to say a few words.
Thank you, Senator. That was very eloquent. I did not know I was going to be asked to speak, but I'm proud to be able to speak on behalf of my son, who passed away on October 27th after a one-year battle with stage 4 cancer. He was a wonderful husband, father, son, brother, and we miss him every single day. He was an inspiration to so many people. I have probably received close to 500 to 1,000 letters from people whose lives he affected. He was particularly interested in bettering the lives of children, as was said, the Ron Clark Academy, in addition, organizations like Camp Twin Lakes. He is irreplaceable in our families' lives, but he is an inspiration for us to carry on, and we are very grateful for this honor, and it means a great deal to our family. So thank you very, very much.
We have another special group we would like to recognize. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 824 by Senators Harper of the 7th and others, a resolution recognizing and commending the State YMCA of Georgia and its Center for Civic Engagement and Y Club programs, which sponsor Youth Assembly, among other programs that cultivate youth civic engagement and for other purposes. Whereas the State YMCA of Georgia's Youth Assembly is a model state legislature for high school students, in which students serve as legislators, justices, attorneys, and lobbyists. And whereas the Youth Assembly allows students to experience firsthand the excitement and importance behind the legislative process and better understand the complexity of the lawmaking process in the state. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend the state YMCA of Georgia's Youth Assembly for 73 years of teaching Georgia's future leaders about the legislative and state government process. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair is none. The resolution is adopted. We greatly appreciate our Youth Assembly and all the wonderful work in which they do throughout the year, and the leadership in which they provide, and certainly representative of our future leaders. It is my honor now to call upon the distinguished senator from the 7th to recognize our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is indeed an honor to recognize the YMCA Youth Assembly and welcome them to the Capitol this morning. This program allows individuals in high school the opportunity to participate in roles and responsibilities that all of us have here at the state capitol in a 3-day session every year. And many of you help in that effort by through the Sponsor Your Seat program, and I want to say thank you to each of you who helped do that and giving these students an opportunity to participate as governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, members of the House and Senate, lobbyists, press, etc., and so on, and debate and issues that they bring forward each and every year, and a lot of them are current issues that we're all dealing with. This morning I have with me at the rostrum Kevin Epps, who's the youth governor of the 73rd Assembly, Zach Stoddard and Liz Quillams, who served as lieutenant governors during the 73rd Assembly. And the reason we have 2 lieutenant governors is because this program has been so successful, they have to have 2 programs now. We'll also have Dr. Randall Trammell. He is the CEO of the YMCA. And I want to thank the YMCA for their good work in allowing these students the opportunity to do this. I know we also have some students in the gallery that are here with us as well as part of this program. If you don't mind, stand up real quick so we can recognize you also. And at this time, I'm going to ask Kevin Epps to come forward to bring a few brief remarks. Kevin?
Good morning. My name is Kevin Epps, and I had the pleasure to serve as one of the youth governors as the state YMCA of Georgia held 2 programs of the 73rd Georgia Youth Assembly. These days, when I watch the news, I find myself in a state of sadness over the deep, hateful divide that seems to have carved out its place in our society. People seem to be less willing to talk and to be rational than they have in the past. It seems everybody carries around a chip on their shoulder, a reason to be angry and to demonize those that disagree with them. At times, it appears as though we have forgotten the power of reasonable conversation in our country. As legislators, you see this play out constantly. People who channel their emotion into non-productive means instead of using their passion to help their greater good. While you may be concerned about my generation and how we will respond to this loss of common sense and understanding, I brought with me a reason for you to be hopeful. You see, last November, we were fortunate to hold our 73rd Youth Assembly program right here under the Golden Dome. Between our 2 assemblies, nearly 1,000 students from the 4 corners of the state were locked in passionate debate and discussion on topics they cared about. These students were learning and teaching one another through respectful discussion and bridging that divide. Today, I would like to thank you for the privilege and opportunity to have access to this wonderful place. There's no better place to learn about how Georgia's government works than where it actually takes place. Our groups are eager and look forward to getting back into these chambers this November. Many of you financially support the Youth Assembly program through the Sponsor Your Seat campaign. We can't begin to express our appreciation for your vote of confidence and your investment in this program and the lives of hundreds of high schoolers across the state. This program educates us, liberates us, and awakens us to the state, nation, and the world around us. In fact, you'll have the opportunity to once again make this investment in the next few days, and I hope you'll respond generously. This year at Youth Assembly, many ideas were introduced and debated by students attending, including reforming civil asset forfeiture laws, to displaying blood types on driver's license to assist with life-saving situations, to banning the sale of pesticides linked to colony collapse disorder. We are excited that because this program continues to grow, we had to split and offer 2 assembly programs. Youth Assembly is a life-changing experience, and its ability to empower Georgia's youth cannot be overstated. This year marked the 73rd Youth Assembly, and in all of these years, tens of thousands of Georgians, some former Georgia governors, sitting U.S. senators, college and university presidents, and several members of this very chamber were able to participate in this Youth Assembly experience. In fact, many members of this body have students currently participating or that have participated in the past few years. Bills created at Youth Assembly or inspired as a result of attending the program have had profound impact on Georgia and the nation at large, ranging from schools granting maternity leave to adoptive parents, or most recently, the no texting while driving legislation known as Caleb's Law. Your investment and support in continuing work of the State YMCA of Georgia is vital to the success of both Georgia and our nation as we seek to inspire and instill a passion for service and intelligent conversation in Georgia's teens. Our country finds itself sitting at an interesting crossroad. There are many who would like nothing less than to see this country divided so deeply that it is left with no way to function. There are those who celebrate and profit off of this division, even at the expense of their own country. However, there's a group of teenagers guided by your leadership and taught at Georgia Youth Assembly program who seek only to unite. Intelligent and understanding debate is a rare resource today, and we would like to take this moment to thank you for using it each and every day in this chamber and for supporting us as we seek to teach students to use it in their everyday lives. I do believe that if we continue to work together with respect for each individual, this state will continue to be a shining example to all the power of passionate and intellectual debate. God bless you. God bless the great state of Georgia and the United States of America. Thank you.
Well done, guys. All right, good. Well done, Kevin. All right, let's do a picture down here. We have another special group we would like to recognize at this time. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 776 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others, a resolution recognizing and commending Byron Elementary Navy Junior ROTC for its continued efforts in shaping youth leaders of the Peach County community and for other purposes. Now, whereas the Junior ROTC program at Byron Elementary School can proudly proclaim that it has a positive impact on students by providing them with a sense of purpose and a feeling of camaraderie that might otherwise be absent without the program. Now, therefore, be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Byron Elementary School Navy Junior ROTC and express their sincerest best wishes for continued success. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. It is such a great honor to have Byron Elementary here, their Junior Navy ROTC. If you ever wonder or worry about what our future is going to look like, I tell you, there's great inspiration in seeing these young people behind me and obviously the path by which they are choosing. To speak to the resolution and recognize our special guest is now my honor to call upon the distinguished senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to colleagues. You're going to be glad you came this morning for many reasons. You're in for a real treat. In a world where we worry about what our children are doing and where they're headed and what's going to happen to our country in the future, it is nice to take a breath and get to celebrate something great that's going on with our kids today. Along with the senator from the 20th, he and I are very proud to honor Byron Elementary Navy Junior ROTC, the only junior ROTC program in an elementary school, and it's right in Byron, Georgia, and we are extremely proud of it. It does lots of things, but in basics, it instills citizenship, service to our country, personal responsibility, and a sense of accomplishment. We have the members, all the members of the Byron Elementary Navy Junior ROTC in the gallery, and I want you all to stand so we can honor y'all. Colleagues, I submit to you that is Exhibit A with what's right with our children today and why our country is going to be in great hands in the future. We got some folks on the dais with us, Captain Mila Holmes, Lieutenant Kamea Lumpkin, Lieutenant Ethan Johnson, Coach Sheldon Allman, who is here and leads these fine young folks, as well as Principal Keith Lauritsen, who's the principal of Byron Elementary. And then I want to call up Lieutenant E.J. Colson, who's going to speak for just a moment to us. Lieutenant?
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for being here. To be in JRTC is an honor and a glory because we could be out on the streets doing anything, and we are in the right hands with Coach Almond. He protects us. He's always going to have the right thing for us. And I just want to thank Coach Almond for all of that. So.
Picture down on the steps, okay? Hey guys, y'all come back up here. We'll take a picture on the steps. Last for best, best for last. Doing well, sir. Ready for a day? We have another group we would like to recognize. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 858 by Senators Harbin and the 16th and others, a resolution recognizing and congratulating Lamar County and for other purposes. Whereas Lamar County was founded on November 2nd, 1921 and was named after Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar, who served as a United States Congressman and Senator, the Secretary of the Interior under President Grover Cleveland, and an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Whereas Lamar County maintains its rural charms and continues to attract new businesses, residents, and visitors who enjoy its traditions, small-town values, and proximity to Atlanta. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and congratulate the citizens of Lamar County on their many outstanding accomplishments. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I will tell you that I am extremely proud of Lamar County and the forward thinking of this leadership group that is behind me. I have been to the community many, many times. Obviously, my chief of staff hails from Barnesville, and he gets me there as many times as I possibly can. But we're proud not only in the partnership that they have provided for the film industry as well, but their innovative aspects as it pertains to waste to energy and other programs. They are destined for even greater heights from economic development and a quality of life for their citizens, and it's all as a result of the great leadership here. To speak to the resolution and recognize our special guest further, it is my honor now to call upon the senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor this morning to have the leaders of Lamar County with us. I'm going to mention them each one. Kathy Oxford, who is the IDA Director. Charles Glass, who is the Chairman of Lamar County. Joe Boswick is the Mayor of Milner and Chairman of the Solid Waste Authority. Peter Banks, Mayor of Barnesville. Johnny Poole, Director of Solid Waste Authority. And also Christopher Delaney is the Chamber Director. The governor already mentioned that one of their products that they put out was the Bo Butler, so you see what they turn out from that standpoint. You've got a phenomenal place in Lamar County. You've got a phenomenal college in Gordon College, which is reaching many, many young people, giving them the opportunities to do things, a phenomenal nursing school. The city of Barnesville, in my opinion, is Mayberry RFD. It is a phenomenal place to walk and go. If you just need a place to get away from it all, go to Barnesville. You won't find any better. The film industry, of course, has used it. It looks like it's there. The solid waste facility, I had a tour of it last year, and it's in process, and it's very neat. Garbage is a good business, I'm finding out, and they are doing some phenomenal things with garbage that you would not believe, digging up. In fact, some of the stuff they were digging up was from the 1950s, and redoing that. It's the home of Rock Springs Church. Pastor Benny Tate and a great community of faith, family, and freedom. I'm going to ask Peter Banks, who also is a past senator from that, to give us a word, if he would, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate, Senator Harbin. Thank you all for this privilege. It's wonderful to be here. We thank you more than you know for this honor. Barnesville and Lamar County is a great place to live, and we appreciate your service. And also, let me tell you how much we appreciate your contributions to the film industry in Georgia. It's helped make us, and I believe it'll help make this state. Thank you so very much.
Awesome. Good job. Let's step down and do a picture on the steps, okay? Are there any unanimous consents? Any senator wishing to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair will recognize Senator from the 29th on a point of personal privilege. Please give the senator your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just about every year I've been in this body, when we've been in session on the 23rd of February or nearby, I've tried to take a moment to commemorate a day in history, a day when, frankly, a miracle of the legislative process occurred. That date was February 23rd, 1807. It was 211 years ago that the British House of Commons passed a bill outlawing the slave trade throughout the British Empire. This came after a 2-decade-long fight led by a parliamentarian named William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was someone who came from a family of privilege. He was elected to Parliament at a very young age. He frankly had the opportunity to rise as far as he wished, could have been Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. But he had a religious conversion as an adult. And he kept having these people come to him and talk to him about abolishing the slave trade. And he initially was resistant to taking on that cause because he knew what that would mean for his political career. He knew that that would put him on the margins because in those days, that was a direct attack on the economy of the British Empire, a direct attack on the triangle trade which the British Empire depended on. Slave trade to the colonies for workers to produce agricultural products that were sent home, to make finished goods, to raise money to then buy more slaves. He was subjected to death threats. He had a very rough go of it for those 20 years. People said he was crazy. He invented the petition drive that we think of. It was unheard of for the actual average person to have a say in the political process, but he went all over the country barnstorming, explaining why we couldn't accept a world that treated human beings like property. And so it was that day, that incredible day 211 years ago, where after 2 decades of fighting and scraping and trying, that the British House of Commons stood up and said no more to the slave trade. Wilberforce would live long enough, though he would not be in Parliament anymore, almost 25 years later, to see that day in the House of Commons where slavery was finally abolished. What a man, what a legacy. Someone who was willing to go against the grain, someone who was willing to do something that for his time was very unpopular, but he was clearly on the right side of history. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 6th. Point of personal privilege.
On February 23rd, 9 years ago, I was given the privilege of becoming Koki Jordan's mother. She has always been quick and strong and kind, and I strive every day to make this world better for her, so she will be able to do and be whatever she wants. Happy birthday, Koki.
There's so much love in this room today, I tell you. I mean, feels good. The pastor, the chaplain of the day, said there was going to be great unity. We believe it to be true. Chair recognizes Senator from the 39th. 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 Moving along, Senator from the 34th be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to continue with the National Baptist Convention. I'd like to chronicle one of the most unique and important establishment in historically rare talked about, that is the National Baptist Convention. When white Southern Baptist churches refused to denounce slavery, they split from the Northern Baptist churches and made a concerted effort to keep blacks out of their churches. The National Baptist Convention USA, Inc. trace a history of significant growth and achievements attended sometimes by periods of turbulence to Saturday, November 22nd, 1880, when 151 persons from 11 states met in Montgomery, Alabama, and organized the Baptist Foreign Mission Convention. The Reverend W.H. McAlpine of Alabama was elected its first president. 6 years later, in 1886, 600 delegates from 17 states gathered at the First Baptist Church in St. Louis, Missouri, and formed the National Baptist Convention of America. 7 years later, in 1893, the National Baptist Education Convention was formed. In 1895, a meeting attended by more than 2,000 clergies was held in Atlanta, Georgia at Friendship Baptist Church, just down the street from my home church, Antioch Baptist Church North. The three largest conventions of the day, the Baptist Foreign Mission Convention, the American National Baptist Convention, and the National Baptist Education Convention, merged to form the National Baptist Convention of the United States of America. The Reverend E.C. Morris of Little Rock, Arkansas, was chosen as the president of this merged body. This brought both Northern and Southern Black Baptist churches together. Among the delegates was Reverend A.D. Williams, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and the grandfather of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Years later, the Progressive National Baptist Convention split from the National Baptist Convention USA, but the fellowship and relationships of our black institutions were the spiritual home, providing the ease of the communication and organization for Black Baptists committed to civil rights. The civil rights movement was fueled by the passion for freedom and justice among many churches, pastors, and members. However, activists were opposed by conservative resistance to change. A prime example of the division was found among Black Baptists who disagreed with the nonviolent direction against the Montgomery bus boycott and the Freedom Ride. Today, I'm proud to announce the name of several members, including my own pastor, Dr. Cameron Madison Alexander, who served as Vice President of the National Baptist Convention USA, Inc., under Dr. J.H. Jackson. Pastor Alexander also served as President of the General Missionary Baptist Convention of Georgia for 29 years and is now President Emeritus. Mr. President, I'll yield the will. Thank you for your time.
Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from Perry, senator from the 20th.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to thank my cousins-in-laws who are in the gallery with us today, Samantha and Ashley Hulbert, for bringing Abby Lofton and Maddie up here to Page for us today. Y'all please join me in welcoming them to the Senate. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 49th on a point of personal privilege.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, want to take just a quick moment to acknowledge and to thank an individual who's been very important in our community and has though she's not tall in stature, she casts a long shadow in the area of nonprofits and service to others. There's an agency in our hometown. It was initially called Challenge Child and Friends, and it operated for many, many years. And now, recently, the name has changed to SISU. And SISU is a Finnish word that really there's no English interpretation of this word. It means indomitable determination. It means grit. It means striving to succeed. It means going beyond what you are typically expected to be capable of. But this young lady is by the name of Jamie Reynolds, and she's right over here on the wall. If y'all would give her a warm Senate welcome, I would really appreciate it. If you'd take a moment to speak to Jamie and get to know her, I assure you, you will be glad that you did. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. There is a consent calendar of privilege resolutions that is before you. Is there objection? Without objection, the consent calendar of privilege resolutions are therefore adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? Moving on to the general calendar now. Secretary will read Senate Bill 397.
Senate Bill 397 by Senator Watson, the first and others. A bill entitled Enactment Chapter 37, Title 36 of the OCGA relating to the acquisition and disposition of real and personal property generally so as to allow municipalities to hire state licensed real estate brokers to assist in the sale of real property and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 1st to present the bill. Sorry, excuse me. One more. Actually, the chair, the majority leader had a motion that I failed to recognize before. So let me do that at this time. Senator from the 46 is recognized.
My light may not have been working. I was trying to catch your attention to this. I would ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 363 be engrossed. That's a bill coming out of Ethics Committee in accordance with our traditions.
Ethics Committee engrossment on the bill. Is there objection? There is objection by the senator from the 6th. Objection by the senator from the 6th. You wish to debate or just object? All those in favor of the engrossment motion authored by the senator from the 46th will rise, stand, and be counted. If you're in favor of engrossment of an ethics bill before this body, rise, stand, and be counted. Reverse. On the motion for engrossment, the yeas are 27 and the nays are 13, and the motion has failed. Chair recognizes Senator from the 46.
I would ask for reconsideration of that vote, please.
Senators ask for reconsideration. Is there objection to reconsideration? Without objection, the reconsideration motion is in order. All those in favor of engrossing all those in favor of engrossing Senate Bill 363, rise, stand, and be counted. Rise, stand, and be counted. Let the folks know out in the halls we are voting in the Senate. Reverse. On the motion for engrossment, the yeas are 33 and the nays are 13, and the motion has passed, and Senate Bill 363 will be engrossed. Chair will recognize a senator from the 1st to present Senate Bill 397.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here to present Senate Bill 397. I was asked to present this bill through the City of Savannah. Basically, now cities are allowed to get rid of surplus property through two methods. One is through their seal bid process or by auctioneer. And this will bring them in line with what the state does. This will just allow real estate agents or brokers to be able to sell property. The history on this is that the City of Savannah has historical property and they would be best served by a real estate agent. It does not require any cities to use a real estate broker, but it does allow them to use it. They may use a real estate broker. The brokers themselves still have to go through the regular request for proposal, RFPs, that anybody else does, and they have to be picked according to quality and what would be best for the city. So if there are no further questions, I'll yield the well.
No questions. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee which fail will pass the bill. Chairs none. Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Any objections? Chairs none. Main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question on pass the bill. All those in favor of the bill vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the pass of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, IMC Rex constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will now read Senate Bill 377.
Senate Bill 377 by Senator Strickland the 17th and others, a bill with title and act to repeal Article 8 of Chapter 7, Title 50 of the OCGA relating to the State Workforce Development Board and to amend Title 34 of the OCGA relating to labor and industrial relations so as to transfer the State Workforce Development Board from the Department of Economic Development to the Technical College System of Georgia and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring to you Senate Bill 377. All this bill is doing is moving the governor's office of workforce development from the Department of Economic Development to our technical college system of Georgia. This move was already contemplated in the governor's recommendation for the 2019 budget. And of course, what we're doing with this bill is connecting those that are working to pair our state's workers with the employers that are coming to number one state in which to do business, with the systems that's directly training our citizens for the 21st century jobs. And with that, Mr. President, I'll be happy to yield for any questions.
No questions, Senator.
I'll yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee which fail will pass the bill. Chair is none. Report of committee is agreed to. All those in favor of the bill vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0, and this bill, I'm seeing reference constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary now will read Senate Bill 402.
Senate Bill 402 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a bill to enact the Achieving Connectivity Everywhere Act to amend Titles 32, 36, 48, and 50 of the OCGA relating to highways, bridges, and ferries, local government, revenue and taxation, and state government, respectively, so as to provide for broadband services, planning, deployment, and incentives, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers the following substitute. Senate Bill 402, a bill to enact the Achieving Connectivity Everywhere Act to amend Titles 32, 36, 48, and 50 of the OCGA relating to highways, bridges, and ferries, local government, revenue and taxation, and state government, respectively, so as to provide for broadband services, planning, deployment, and incentives, to provide the authorization for the Department of Transportation to take certain actions to enable the rights of way of interstate highways to be used for the deployment of broadband and other communications technologies and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from Dahlonega, senator from the 51st, the majority whip, gray suit, red tie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I bring to you today the first of a series of bills that you'll be seeing throughout this session. It's a topic that we've all heard a lot about and we've talked a lot about in our districts, especially out in the rural areas of the state. It's a topic that we spend a lot of time on. Starting in 2016, we had a joint study committee with the House, and I want to thank some of the senators that are still in the chamber that participated on that study committee. The senator from the 7th, the former senator from the 17th, the senator from the 26th, and the senator from the 50th. We spent a great deal of time going around the state listening to concerns about rural Georgia and about connectivity and rural broadband and the lack thereof. The bill that we have before us today is the first of several bills, as I said, but this bill is known as the ACE Act, which is Achieving Connectivity Everywhere Act. Folks, there is a digital divide in our country between urban and rural areas, and we found out through our study committee just how bad that divide is becoming. Technology is changing rapidly. We see differences in economic growth between rural areas and urban areas. We see challenges in telehealth, education, economic development, and just basic connectivity issues at home where children can no longer keep up with classroom assignments because a lot of these classroom assignments are required to be done online. This bill sets out a platform and a beginning of what we think will be a great solution in the near future for our state to reach those areas of the rural areas of our state of Georgia. The first part of the bill allows the DOT to open up the access to the interstate highway right-of-way system to allow for broadband to be deployed in those areas. Now, this is the first time that this has been done in Georgia. Typically, you won't see utilities or infrastructure laid in the interstate right-of-ways, but the Department of Transportation is already working on an RFP process that would go out looking for a public-private partnership that would allow this company to lay the fiber optic lines into the right-of-way in the interstates to allow to get this broadband and this fiber optic cable deployed out into the rural areas of the state. The bill also authorizes DCA to create a program that recognizes cities and counties as broadband-ready communities. A broadband-ready community would be one somewhat similar to a film-ready community or a storm-ready community. It's a community that goes to the DCA and they follow the guidelines and the criteria that's set out by the department that would allow them to advertise their communities as broadband-ready. And what the importance of that is that it would allow a county or city to streamline their permitting processes to allow the industry folks to come in and be able to speed up the investment of broadband in that community. The broadband-ready community site designation is also something that's important for economic development. It would allow local communities such as development authorities, either a downtown development authority or a county development authority, it would give them the opportunity to identify sites or inventory of industrial parks and properties that are already available that have a gigabit or higher of internet access. Once that site has been designated by the DCA as a community site designation, that site would be promoted through the Department of Economic Development as a gigabit site. That would help, especially when we have prospects that are coming into Georgia looking for a place to relocate. And we've heard of several already this year. One would be like the big company named Switch that is spending billions of dollars in Douglas County. We think that we can also attract those data centers to the rural areas of Georgia, and that would be huge for our economic development opportunities. This bill would allow for a tax exemption for the investors, such as the telecommunications companies and the internet service providers who put money into these rural areas, and we've designated in the bill that a rural county would be 50,000 or less in population, and it would have to meet certain criteria as to being spent in areas where the area is underserved or unserved. And all that criteria would be spelled out in this bill and also would be controlled by the Georgia Technology Authority and the DCA. This bill also adds a grant provision in the code section that would allow us to set up grant funding by the state. We would utilize the federal funds that we anticipate coming from Washington in the near future. We would require a 50-50 match with the industry folks. With the local match and the state and federal monies, we believe we could set up a good grant program that would help incentivize the private sector to come into our communities and start to expand and deploy fiber optic cables and to expand internet access to homes and businesses, schools, healthcare facilities, and so forth. The original bill was discussed at this meeting. We've had several meetings throughout the committee's process. We've made some changes to it, but I think this is a bill that we can all get behind and we can be proud of going forward, and I look forward to any questions you may have. Mr. President, I'll yield the well if there's no questions.
You do have a question. Chair first recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I do.
Senator, thank you so much for your hard work on this bill. Isn't it true that we're all proud that Georgia is currently a good place to conduct business?
Absolutely.
And isn't it further true, Senator, that this hard work will make it easier to have such prosperity and wealth spread throughout the rest of the state?
That's correct.
But isn't it also true, Senator, that if we are simultaneously passing bills that our business community thinks will cause us to get black eyes in terms of their efforts to attract business, that we would be undermining those very goals?
I'm not sure of your question or what you're referring to in this particular legislation.
No, it's not about this particular legislation. I'm asking you if we should keep our eye on the ball in trying to attract business and and continue to make this the #1 state to do business.
We definitely look forward to more business opportunities in Georgia.
And isn't it true, Senator, that actions taken by this General Assembly could actually undermine that goal?
Everything we do has unintended consequences, and we
Thank
just
you,
have
Senator.
to look at every bill on its merits. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks, Senator.
Let's keep the questions on the subject matter of the particular bill. Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, isn't it true, after traveling the state with you, we found that just dealing with broadband period was a $500 million to $1 billion deal?
Well, thanks for that question, because that's part of the bill that I did not elaborate on. We don't know for sure what the dollar amount would be to fix every part of the state. And that's why this bill charges the GTA, the Georgia Technology Authority, with the responsibility of going through the state and doing a needs assessment, doing an inventory of what existing fiber optic cables are already in the ground. Some are owned by public agencies, some are owned by private entities. They would come back with that information once that assessment is made, and they would actually develop a statewide deployment plan. And then from that information, we would be able to quantify what that dollar amount would be to go out and to fix all of those problems if we had enough money to do it all at one time. So at this time, we do not know what the maximum dollar amount would be. We know it is in the hundreds of millions of dollars if you did it all at one time. Yes, sir.
Would the Senator further yield?
I do.
Senator, isn't it true there are several bills dealing with broadband right-of-ways in order to get broadband into rural Georgia, where there has been the biggest complaint?
Would you ask that question again? I didn't hear
I
the
said,
first
Senator, isn't it true there are several bills, not just this one, but there
Correct.
are others to follow it?
Yes, sir. There are 3 bills in the Senate, and I know of 1 or more in the House that's being worked on.
Isn't it also true that we've got to deal with right-of-ways in order to do what we think is best to represent all of Georgia?
That's correct. Public right-of-ways are owned by the public. They're utilized for, obviously, for transportation purposes, but also for infrastructure. It's critical for cities and counties to utilize our state and local right-of-ways, but this too is an appropriate use of those right-of-ways. It will increase the speed of getting that technology deployed, and it'll lower the cost and reduce the barriers to entry.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, isn't it also true while we are working and we receive all of these calls and emails about the right-of-way, isn't it true that we're trying to work with GMA and ACCG, but we are going into those communities where they have no broadband connection, and yet and still we've not been able to satisfy any of them? But isn't it also true through the process, hopefully we will have something that will at least they agree to in order to get broadband?
Yes, sir, and our local governments are always a partner in everything we do down here. This particular bill does not have any opposition from the local governments. They support the language. There are other bills that they are still working with us on, but it's going to take a team effort for all of our local government partners, along with the DOT and other state agencies, to make a difference in this particular situation we have. But thanks for the questions.
Chair recognizes Senator from 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Senator yield?
I do.
As I've been listening to you speak, well, first of all, I want you to know that I support the measure. Rural broadband in Georgia is definitely necessary for economic development and to increase the business opportunities for the rural parts of Georgia. As I've been listening to you speak, I've heard lots of comments about fiber, laying the cable, and so on and so forth along the right-of-way. Does this bill also allow for future technologies around wireless, 5G, as well, or is it just limited to the fiber cable?
This particular bill sets out the framework and the platform to be able to deploy that fiber optic cable out into those rural areas, which is important for any other technology that we know that's in the market today. You mentioned 5G specifically. Small cell technology, as you may have heard, if you were in the committee yesterday when we passed that bill, 5G technology is going to require this fiber optic cable as well to backfeed their data. They can't do it wirelessly back to their main server. So the wireless component broadband connectivity is very critical, especially for the last mile. But once you get it to that transmitter, it has to be backfed through fiber cable, which is critical to get all of this put together across the state.
So then it'd be fair to say this is a first step in being able to implement some of that future technology.
It is a major step in the right direction, and it'll, again, lay the groundwork and create the platform to where we can launch the other programs forward in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 21st.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I do.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. I'm very supportive of this bill, but on line 128 through 130, it talks about any fee imposed or permit shall be at reasonable and at cost based. Can you elaborate a little bit on the fees on page 5? Can you address that? It's lines 128 to 130.
I'm looking for the code section, see which one you're in, if it's talking about the grant programs, or is it just talking about?
Well, it's D3.
Yes, sir.
And it says that any fee imposed by such political subdivision to review an application, issue a permit, or perform any other activity related to broadband network, the project shall be reasonable and cost-based.
Yeah, so as we've discussed over the last year and a half, we're hearing from incumbent providers, and we use that word a lot. Those are the wireless communication companies, the telecoms, the cable companies. Their frustration has been the huge barriers to entry. In other words, some of your local governments charge higher prices for fees and for other access application requirements than others. So we've heard cities in Georgia charging as much as $9,000 to attach one antenna to a pole, to where you have other communities that may have a reasonable charge that basically charges them enough just to recover the cost of that application. So we're talking about $200 at the low level and as high as $9,000 at the higher level, all inside the same state, but amongst different local governments. And we want to try to reduce that burden and that cost, streamline the process to allow this investment money, this private investment capital, to be deployed out into our state and especially in the rural areas.
Thank you.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you. I encourage your vote for this bill.
Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee, which fail pass the bill. Chair is none. Porter Committee is agreed to. All of those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. While the vote is going on and we're conducting our business, it is such an honor when we have our representatives from Congress here, and we are very, very honored to have our newest one. Please join me in welcoming Karen Handel.
Thank you. Hey, John. Hi, Brandon. It is really a terrific, incredible honor to be here, and Mr. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so very much. And it is really an honor to be back in the Georgia Capitol. As some of you know, it's been a while since I was here as Secretary of State and had my office on the second floor and was eyeing another office on the second floor. But times, they do change. And what I know is this, that former rivals, real leaders, we understand that the future is what is in front of us and ahead of us. So I'm here today first to say thank you to so many of you for your support in sending me to Washington, and mostly for the friendship that I have really been able to enjoy with so very many of you. I want to also just take a moment to wish our First Lady, Sandra Deal, a continued speedy recovery in her fight against breast cancer. And cancer is always terrible, but when it strikes one of our own, it really does bring it home for us. What I know about the First Lady is that she is a fighter, so cancer had better watch out. I've been in Congress for just 8 months, but we have begun to make some very good progress. Georgians are now, thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Bill, able to keep more of their hard-earned money in their paychecks to use with their families. It is the largest, most sweeping tax cuts bill in a generation, and it really is going to help our economy. It already is. You saw the Atlanta Fed upped its projection for the economy to grow at about 5%. So I'm very excited about that. I also know that you will be considering legislation to ensure that that tax cut from the federal level rolls through the state. And I know that in this body, reducing taxes is always a top priority. So I'm going to say a hopeful early thank you on that one. Certainly, we each have our roles, me at the federal level and you at the state level, but we are partners together in working to make the lives of Georgians every single day just a little bit better for them. And in Congress, we're working to address the opioid crisis head on. You should know that the FY18 budget and FY19 budget has an additional $3 billion in each year to help combat opioid crisis, and that will roll down to the states. So I will look forward to working with you as we continue our efforts in that area. Secondly, I want to mention transportation and the infrastructure package. Georgia is one of the states that had the courage to stand up and step up to take control of our transportation and infrastructure destiny. I am here to tell you that that is going to matter when we're looking at this infrastructure bill, so that states that took that step like Georgia, that we are making sure that you get credit for that as we're looking at rolling out the additional matching dollars there. So know that I pledge to be your partner on the infrastructure bill, on the opioid crisis, as we work to deepen our broadband capabilities in our state. I'm here to be your partner and your eyes and ears in Washington, D.C. I thank you for this honor. I look forward to working with you. Thank you much, and God bless.
On the pass of the bill, the yeas are 52 and the nays are 0. And this bill, MC Rex constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read Senate Bill 427.
Senate Bill 427 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others, a bill with title and act amend Code Section 19615 of the OCGA relating to child support and final verdict or decree, guidelines for determining amount of award, continuation of duty to provide support and duration of support so as to change provisions relating to the court's discretion in making a final determination of support and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following subject to Senate Bill 427, a bill with title and act amend Code Section 19615 of the OCGA relating to child support and final verdict or decree, guidelines for determining amount of award, continuation of duty to provide support and duration of support so as to change provisions relating to the court's discretion in making a final determination of support and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 18th present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I bring to you Senate Bill 427. This bill comes to us because just last month, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administrations for Children and Families and Child Support Enforcement released some new regulatory changes applicable to all state-administered child support programs. This went into effect, in fact, just about a month ago on January the 20th, 2017. There's basically 4 areas that break down where changes are made to existing child support guideline recommendations. They are, number one, that under the new regulations, consideration must be given to an obligor's ability to pay the ordered child support amount. The second is incarceration may not be treated as voluntary unemployment. Voluntary unemployment is a term of art with regard to child support determinations, and under the new regulations, incarceration may not be treated as such. Number three is that the imputation of income must be based on evidence of an obligor's ability to earn and other economic factors. And finally, number four is a child's ability or eligibility for enrollment in public health care is to be sufficient for required health care when the support order provides for health care. There's one other change that you'll find in the bill that's addressed because of some February the 2nd, 2018, literally just 3 weeks ago, Congress implemented a change to the Federal Social Security Act requiring the Division of Child Support Services to increase the annual maintenance fee charged to the obligor from $25 to $35 in each case. Making these statutory changes that are recommended or that are found in our bill ensures compliance with the, quote, final rule and avoids risking the loss of federal funds for TANF block grants that come to Georgia, and it will also bring the Division of Child Support Services into compliance with the recent change made with the Federal Social Security Act. Given our legislative where we are, given that the requirement that this needs to be done during our session now, otherwise the risk of the loss of these funds is possible as early as July 1 of this year, it's important that we pass this legislation. I urge your support.
You do have a question. Chair recognizes Senator from the 45th for a question.
Thank you. Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I should have asked you this question before. On lines 72 through 77, I wanted to ask you a theoretical question. If a child is living with the mother and the father and they have private insurance, and then they start living with the mother and they go on Medicaid, and then their divorce decree and custody is adjudicated, if the child goes with the mother, is the father obligated to have private insurance for them, or is that in the?
Senator, I think that question would be addressed by the order from the Superior Court granting, and that would drive and determine exactly what the award would be. The only change made here is, as you'll see specifically on line 73, is the addition of other public health care program. That's added to the list of different considerations that the court can look to.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question.
No further questions.
Thank you. I yield the will.
Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is the objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is the objection agreed and report of committee which fail pass the bill? Chairs none, report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Any objections? Chairs none, main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0, and this bill, MC Rex constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read Senate Bill 375.
Senate Bill 375 by Senator Ligon III and others, a bill entitled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 5, Title 49 of the CGA, relating to children and youth services, so as to allow a child placing agency to decline to accept a referral from the department and decline to perform services not referred under a contract with the department based on the child placing agency's sincerely held religious beliefs and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 375, a bill entitled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 5, Title 49 of the CGA, relating to children and youth services, so as to allow a child placing agency to decline to accept a referral from the department and decline to perform services not referred under a contract with the department based on child placing agency's sincerely held religious beliefs and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 3rd to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin the presentation of Senate Bill 375 by telling you about a little boy that was born last October. You see, this little fellow was born under the most difficult of circumstances because his mother was a heroin addict. And she used heroin all during the pregnancy. She sought no prenatal care. In fact, she was so consumed with her addiction that she never saw a doctor. And her son was born prematurely, maybe because of the lack of care, nutrition, who knows, or maybe it was just because 8 hours before the birth she took a heavy dose of heroin. But at least she recognized that she would not be able to care for her child. And she decided to place that baby up for adoption. And she just had one request. She wanted it in the home of a couple that were faith-based, and maybe that child would have a different life than she had. But because of her situation and because that baby came early, arrangements were not yet completed, and there was the real possibility that that child would have to go into a foster care system. But a private faith-based agency stepped up, quickly found a couple, the process was completed, and they agreed to take that baby in and adopt it, even though they knew that the road would be hard and that their son would likely have permanent issues caused by the mother's choices. And the road has been hard, and that child has gone through extreme withdrawals and has had to take methadone to get off the heroin addiction. But his new family has loved him, and that child is doing well, doing much better. And yes, he'll serve long-term effects of that, but he has a family that will support him in his journey through life. And in a way, this child was fortunate, not because of the circumstances of his birth, but because even though those circumstances were present with him, circumstances that did not make him an attractive candidate for adoption, he was given a family. And it's very, very likely that if he had not had that opportunity, that he would have spent a good bit of time in a foster care system. But there are children in this state that are not so fortunate as that little boy. In 2016, there were 13,000 children in our foster care system, only 4,300 homes available. Of those children in foster care, 2,500 had a permanency goal for adoption, but just over 1,000 were actually adopted. Well, what does it mean if a child is in foster care for the long term? Well, according to the Journal of Child Psychology and Child Psychiatry from a study that they conducted, the suicide rate for those who've experienced long-term foster care are 4 to 5 times greater than their peers in the general population. They're 8 times more likely to be hospitalized for serious psychiatric disorders. A study of the Casey Foundation found that in Washington State and Oregon, 81% of males that had gone through foster care were arrested by the age 25, 35% incarcerated. Of those who graduated from high school, only 2% ever obtained a bachelor's degree, as opposed to 20% of the adults in the general population. The National Foster Youth Institute in 2014 reported that 60% of children recovered through FBI raids across the state had been involved in the foster care system. that states across our nation, including here, we're failing these children by not doing everything that we can do to ensure that every door of opportunity is open and available to them for placement. How can this be when, for centuries, churches, people of faith, and faith-based organizations have worked to rescue children from desperate circumstances and put them in loving homes? Well, this has happened in a couple of ways. First, there have been policies and laws enacted that were hostile, that forced agencies to choose between violating their faith or closing their doors, and that's happened in Massachusetts, Illinois, California, the District of Columbia. Other states have failed to provide legal assurance that these agencies would not be in breach of contract or find themselves subject to unnecessary suits. In our hearings, we had an agency that operates in Georgia. They came and they said if they had the assurance provided with this bill, that they would then feel that they're safe, that they're capable of contracting with the state, and they could provide up to 50 homes a year to children in our foster care system. Think about that. Over 10 years, 500 children given the opportunity for a good life. Opportunities which statistics and studies show that those that are in the system for the long term will not have. This bill does not in any way prevent anyone from adopting. It does not prevent any agency, faith-based, secular, from participating in placing children in loving homes. The goal is to open as many doors as possible for those children that are in need of homes. And this bill will do that. And I'm asking this body to help these children, to open up these doors, and to provide the legal stability and certainty for those who want to participate in the system and to provide these benefits for these children. Mr. President, I'll be glad to answer any questions about this bill.
The senator from the 6th, you wish to ask a question or you want to speak? Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a question.
Yes, I will.
I appreciate your comments, and I think we all want the best for children in this state. My questions really go more to some of the language of the bill specifically.
Sure.
And what I want to know is, you would agree that decisions regarding the placement of children should be made using the best interest of the child standard?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the bill recites that.
Specifically says that, right?
Specifically says that.
And this includes using a child-placing organization best able to provide for a child's physical, psychological, spiritual, and emotional needs and development. True?
Sure. Yes.
So let me give you this hypothetical. Isn't it true that, looking at the language of this bill, if the department were trying to place a gay teenager, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that a child placing agency was anti-gay, right? Anti-LGBTQ, that they could not take that into consideration in determining whether or not that child placing agency was the best child placing agency for that child?
Well, I disagree with you on that. Certainly, the child placing agencies have a duty to act in the best interest of the child, and those are factors that could be considered. I disagree.
Will the senator yield?
Yes. I'll yield for a series of questions.
Okay, that will be helpful. Thank you. In the code section, adverse action means an action that results in directly or indirectly the denial of a contract or a placement, correct?
Correct.
So with respect to adverse action, if the department makes a determination that a gay teenager should not be placed with a particular agency because they have expressed an anti-gay position previously or have declined to take a placement previously because of being anti-gay, then the department cannot take that into account when they're making the determination.
Right. First of all, I'm not aware of any agencies declining to accept or place a child. I mean, they do so for various reasons, because they don't have a home that's suited. They have an obligation to try to make the best match possible. That is certainly what's taken into consideration in determining what's the best interest of the child. So, I mean, I think you're raising an issue that's not happening, and that these agents, you know, they're bound to find the best fit possible, because you don't want to have circumstances where that home is in trouble or is disrupted. And by providing a variety of options, then you have are able to accommodate many different viewpoints, and that's what this bill does.
And in fact, Senator, you said that doesn't really happen, correct?
Sure, yes.
And in fact, it hasn't really happened that any of these private adoption agencies have actually been discriminated against in Georgia.
Well, they have asked to contract with the state, and when they look at the contract, they say, we do not feel like we're on solid legal ground, that we would not be able to operate in accordance with our faith and the views of our faith.
So based on some feeling they have.
No, it's not based on feeling. It's based on a legal analysis of the contract. And you're a very smart attorney, and I'm sure that if you were advising them and you looked at those circumstances, you would tell them that you need to be careful with this. And that's what they've said. That's what they've told me. And so that's why they want to have the assurance that they would be able to exercise their fundamental right to the free exercise of their faith. And that right, the ability to do that, has been recognized, in recent Supreme Court decisions. And so this is just going along with that and providing them with the certainty that they've been seeking. So,
Senator, with respect to that, I am an attorney.
Sure.
Right? But I'm also a senator, and I'm here specifically representing my district.
Right.
And in terms of that, what I'm more concerned about is the imprimatur of the state basically saying that folks can discriminate against some of our Georgians. So that's what I'm worried about. And really opening up, we're talking about if an attorney is looking at this bill and giving advice to their client, I see my client as the state of Georgia. And wouldn't this open up the state of Georgia to legal action in terms of state-based discrimination?
No, it would not. Because the Supreme Court just last year in the case of Trinity Lutheran Church held that you can't condition benefits upon a recipient's willingness to surrender his religiously impelled status, and that can operate as a penalty to the free exercise of faith. And just because you're a faith-based organization does not mean that you check your faith at the door and that you cannot participate in government programs. We have a long history of jurisprudence that recognizes those rights, and that is what we're talking about here. Let's face it, there is a difference of opinion on this issue and on the issue of marriage. But the Supreme Court, when it dealt with that issue, recognized that there will be a difference of opinion, and that we need to find out ways to how to accommodate those people that have those different beliefs. And so we're either going to accommodate or we're going to subordinate one belief to another. And this is an accommodation. And the purpose of the accommodation is to ensure that children have as many options available to them for placement in a home. And it, like I said, it does not keep any agency, faith-based or secular, from having that opportunity to participate in the program.
Senator, I want to go back to the U.S. Supreme Court case that you cited in terms of how it would protect the state. But doesn't it swing both ways then, that then the agency, the adoption agencies that you're talking about, wouldn't be subject to legal action? If your interpretation of that case is what you say it is.
That they would not be? Yeah, that they would not be.
So if they would not be, then why in the world do we need this statute?
Because the way the state itself could be more restrictive than what the Supreme Court has said in that regard. So They want that certainty. They don't want to have problems with the state. They don't want to be spending the money defending against illegal action. They want to spend their money placing children in homes. And what's wrong with recognizing, the right of a child to have every opportunity available to be placed in a good home? And what's wrong with saying, yeah, you're a faith-based agency. We're going to ensure you that you can participate. You're a secular agency. You know what? We want you to participate too. That's what we're saying here.
And that's currently the law, correct?
Well, we don't know. I mean,
Well,
it's the law, but from the standpoint of the contract, it's not that clear.
So
and they're asking for that certainty.
So is there any evidence that the state of Georgia has ever gone after one of these faith-based adoption agencies for breach of contract due to failure to place a child due to some closely held religious belief?
You know what? No, but there's evidence that it's happening in other parts of this country, and it has happened in other parts of this country, and they've been put out of business.
And those are different situations because in those states, they actually have anti-discrimination statutes that were implicated. Isn't that true?
Well, maybe, but
And
they've
we do
still
not
been.
hear, true?
But here's the thing: if you're focusing on the children, then you're saying we don't want them to go out of business. But your focus is not on the children. Your focus is on other matters. And the question is, do you want to provide as many open doors as possible, as many opportunities as possible to children in need? And listen, we're arguing about this, but there are hundreds, there are thousands of children right now today under the care of this state that need a family. And there are agencies that say we will be glad to participate and do this if we're given the legal certainty that we're seeking to ensure that we don't have legal issues. And from my standpoint, I think we need to make every opportunity available to these children to have a home.
So, Senator, we're on the same page with respect to that.
Right.
But my problem is the language of the statute, which tends to put these adoption agencies before the best interest of the child and does not let the department actually use what we know about these adoption agencies in terms of being anti-gay and the like, in terms of making determination as to whether it is in the best interest of the child to be placed with that agency. That's the actual language of the statute.
But when the agency has a duty to find the right fit, and they do that all the time. They do that all the time. And so if you're not doing that, then you certainly have another issue with your placement. And they could, if the fence aren't working, they'll have issues with it. So
the lights that are on, are any of you wishing to ask a question? All of you are wishing the floor. No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, we're holding the keys to that door in our hands. And I'm just asking you to use it and open up the door of opportunity for the children of this state. I yield well.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 40th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one I don't need any notes on, I don't think. I've been down here 20 years. I've watched times evolve. We're having debates today we didn't have 20 years ago. We may not have had 10 years ago. I remember a number of years ago, I told a friend of mine on the Democratic side that I would be very happy to sign a civil union bill. Back then, it was a big deal because I felt that if somebody had been a partner for 20 years and they're dying in the hospital, they certainly ought to be there when somebody's dying in the hospital. I thought it was the right thing to do now, and now it's a moot point because the courts have ruled that marriage between a man and a woman is, you can also have gay marriage. And we are here to uphold the law. And there's many people in the room
okay? They were raised a certain way. My dad was a Baptist preacher. I was taught homosexuality was a sin. You know, today it's legal to have gay marriage in this state, and I will respect the laws of the state, no matter what my personal beliefs are. What bothers me here is the issue. I watched this, and I'm thinking right now, I've watched, and the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, a few years ago, I think we had 7,000 kids in foster care. To now we have 13 or 14,000 kids in foster care. We're losing the battle here. And if it's true, and I believe it is, if a senator from the 3rd says it, that their agencies are not coming to the state because they're not quite sure they'd end up in court, or if rules and regulations could change, administrations could change. No matter what the Supreme Court says, they'd be tied up in litigation. And we're not serving kids. We need as many people as possible. You know, I watch my own church, for example. This country needs more participation from faith-based agencies. I've got a big Hispanic population out where I live. The people from my church, they go there middle of the week after schools and they teach these kids. These are faith-based agencies. Government can't do everything. And I guess, you know, the Supreme Court, you know, we've got 2 learned attorneys here going back and forth. I personally believe in gay adoption at this point in my life. 10 years ago, probably not. But I'd rather have 2 loving people care for a young person than have them languish in the foster care system for 8 or 10 years or whatever, go through 5 or 6 or 7 families. I sat on that foster care commission that the lieutenant governor called. I listened to the stories in there. And what I see this bill does, it says, yes, we can broaden the opportunities to place children. And when I see a video that somebody sent me from an opposition candidate to me that, well, this is taxpayer money. Really? I thought it was about taking care of children and giving children opportunities. And the media, unfortunately, okay, and I don't want to talk about Amazon and the effect on business. I'm tired of watching us fail in certain areas, and we have failed these foster children. They get in here. The statistics he read are true. They end up in the streets, a lot of them down the road. If this broadens the base for opportunities to somebody to find people that love them and raise them, then by God, I'm going to vote for it, okay? I'm not saying that the world is perfect, okay? Everyone has their own beliefs on things, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, I think this broadens what we can do for people and give them better opportunities. And really, it's about, we're supposed to serve all the people in this state, particularly if you're a person of faith, the least and the few of you. And I don't think I need to take any questions at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator has yielded the well, not wishing to ask questions. Senator from the 36th, light is up next in order. You are recognized this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, you may be ready to vote now, having heard the point made by the senator from the 6th that actually we can go right ahead with business as usual and not have to have this bill passed and continue with placing foster children in loving homes. But I will add a couple of comments to those that have been made. The author shared a story and said the mother wants a faith-based family to adopt this child of this heroin-addicted mother. Well, I want to just underscore for those of us here that gay people also practice in faith communities, also have religious beliefs. The idea, the aspersion cast that a same-sex couple cannot constitute a faith-based family, what are we saying here? What kind of belief is that? And as the Senator from DeKalb pointed out, things have changed greatly during the time some of us have been here in this legislature. And now the law of the land has spoken quite clearly on the fact that equal protection under the law of our grand U.S. Constitution means that LGBT people are also protected. They have the same protections. And that took a long, long battle in the streets and in the courts to have that affirmed. And that's what we're operating under today. The highly questionable proposition that we'll do more for our foster children and have more placements if we allow agents that discriminate against LGBT couples to operate in the state. We need every loving family that we can find to step up and offer to build a home for a child coming out of foster care that will give a stability to that child. You heard the statistics. They're not good for children that age out in foster care. Their future is not very bright. We bring supports. We need to bring more supports to those that age out in foster care. But this proposition that we should encourage agencies and change our law and protect agencies that are going to deny loving families the opportunity to adopt a child from our foster care system is just, it's backwards on its face. You want more families coming forward to adopt children and reduce this growing load of children that are stuck in our foster care system? Well, the way that you do that is not to bar LGBT families from adoption. And that's what these agencies seek to do and will in fact do. Now, in the Supreme Court decision, Justice Kennedy wrote for the majority, articulately stating how many same-sex couples, this is in quotes, straight from the opinion, many same-sex couples provide loving and nurturing homes to their children, whether biological or adopted. Hundreds of thousands of children are presently being raised by such couples. This provides powerful confirmation from the law itself that gays and lesbians can create loving, supportive families. The preamble of this very bill that is before us asserts that the General Assembly finds it's important that decisions regarding the placement of children be made using the best interest of the child standard. And if we believe that's true, then let's prioritize permanency and well-being of the child before an agency operator's personal ideology. Otherwise, we are closing the door on loving homes and loving couples that wish to take not even just one, but more than one child, adopt them and raise them in a loving family.
You do have a question.
I'll just close by saying, and it's not the first time I've said it from the well, under this gold dome, we are not all straight people. We have people under this gold dome working in the offices, working in the state agencies, doing a myriad of tasks from top to bottom to make this great big institution of a state government work. And they come to work every day and they do their job and they come into an atmosphere where bills that implicitly declare that LGBT people are substandard, are questionable, can't provide a loving home, don't have the right that a straight couple has. I just wonder, do we ever pause and think of the hurt that is caused, the implicit dismissal and underlying hatred for people who are LGBT individuals and couples? Think about that as you cast your vote and what message we are sending to those in our very families, those in our communities, those in our offices, those in our workspaces, those across this great, grand, complex, textured society in which we all live and work and play. And don't vote for bills that send a message of hate and that you are less than and you're not worthy in the eyes of God to adopt a child. Let's don't participate in that. Let's be bigger and better than that. Thank you very much. I will yield for questions.
You have one question.
I'm
Senator
sorry?
from the 19th, you wish to ask a question? Senator will yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator yield?
I'll yield.
Senator, would you support the ability of an agency that potentially only adopted to homosexual couples to exist in this state?
I don't believe that exists in the world, under the sun, what you just described. I mean, I think that's a kind of it's a question, posing a hypothetical that doesn't exist. So it's difficult to answer that. I don't think that exists.
Would the senator further yield?
Unless you have some knowledge you'd like to share about it. I don't know about that. Thank you.
Senator, I believe that under this bill that if that was actually a deeply held belief that would be created, and I just wanted to make sure that the senator was aware that this bill would actually allow such a thing to exist, should that be a deeply held religious belief.
Should there be unicorns in the mountains of North Georgia? Yeah, there's not such an agency. There's not such an agency, and so that's really not. It's an abstraction. If there are no other questions, I'll yield away, Mr. President.
There are a couple questions, but you're welcome to yield if you so choose, or you can.
Yeah, I'll yield.
All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Senator from 29th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we were beginning our day, I listened to the young man who was with the senator from the 7th talk about respectful dialogue and having a debate on issues where we don't demonize other people. And I wish we could carry him around to some of our committee meetings on this issue. I think any discussion of this bill has to begin with asking the question, what is the fundamental public policy when it comes to adoption and foster care in our state? This body considered a bill earlier this session. It's been passed through the legislature to streamline our adoption laws, made a number of policy changes, all directed toward the goal of expediting the process of adoption so that children languishing in our foster care system can find permanent, loving homes that are safe and secure. And I would imagine that it would not be controversial to take the position that the public policy of this state should be to maximize the number of at-risk children who are given permanent placement in loving, safe, and secure homes. And I would submit to you, the legislation before us, that is the goal of the legislation. It is to maximize the number of players on the field who are competent in placing children in permanent, loving homes. Now, I sense from some of the debate, both in committee and on the floor today, that one of the discussion points is going to be, well, this bill is simply not necessary. A simple survey of what has happened around the country makes it obvious, painfully obvious, that at any time, through executive action, through court action, the law on this could change in an instant. It is fair to say that there is a high degree of uncertainty as to how current faith-based adoption agencies will be able to continue to perform their mission in Georgia. We don't know what it'll look like. We're going to leave on March 29th and go home. We don't know what's going to happen on April the 3rd, you know. And I would submit to you, because I've seen this happen a few times over the 8 years I've been here, when there's uncertainty in the law that can affect a business interest, nothing negative has occurred yet, no negative consequence has befallen the particular business, but a member of this body identifies that, we jump all over ourselves to try to pass legislation that establishes certainty in the law so that they can be confident that they can continue to operate. This is no different. All we are trying to do is provide a degree of certitude to those agencies that are already operating here. And as the senator from the 3rd said, not only is there that issue, but that there's the issue that additional players very well may come online if they know that there's certainty in the legal environment in terms of being able to place children for adoption. But my guess would be, if we knew that tomorrow something would happen that would cause every faith-based adoption agency in this state to shut their doors, we would want to do what we could to keep them open, because we want the pipeline to be as wide and broad as possible, because we've heard the statistics. We heard the statistics in the debate on the original adoption legislation that came before this body about the 13,000 children in foster care system, the hundreds of children that age out every year. And the senator from the 3rd spoke eloquently regarding what that means for the future of that person if they never get a placement in a loving, safe, and secure environment. I think along with this argument that this is some sort of solution in search of a problem, I know we are now live streaming our committee meetings. We did not live stream the subcommittee meeting that took place on this legislation. And I have a distinct recollection of the very first person that came to testify. It was I believe a Methodist minister who came up, and she said words to the effect that people who hold to a orthodox view of marriage that is faith-based, that they should have no business adopting children, period, end of sentence, end of paragraph. So the idea that that sentiment is not out there and that is not a policy goal that is being pushed toward, we've seen it, again, around the country, as the senator from the 3rd stated, is simply not the case. Now, we find ourselves here, I think it is, no one would disagree, in large part because of the Supreme Court's decision in 2015 regarding the definition of marriage. And I hope you will indulge me for a moment where I read from Chief Justice Roberts' dissenting opinion in that case, because I think it has some direct bearing on the debate we're having today. The Chief Justice wrote, "But today, the court puts a stop to all that," referring to the decision of the majority. "By deciding this question under the Constitution, the court removes it from the realm of democratic decision. There will be consequences to shutting down the political process on an issue of such profound public significance. Closing debate tends to close minds. People denied a voice are less likely to accept the ruling of a court on an issue that does not seem to be the sort of thing courts usually decide. As a thoughtful commentator observed about another issue, the political process was moving, not swiftly enough for advocates of quick, complete change, but majoritarian institutions were listening and acting. Heavy-handed judicial intervention was difficult to justify and appears to have provoked not resolved conflict. Indeed, however hardened the proponents of same-sex marriage might be on this day, it is worth acknowledging what they have lost and lost forever, the opportunity to win the true acceptance that comes from persuading their fellow citizens of the justice of their cause. And they lose this just when the winds of change were freshening at their backs. Federal courts are blunt instruments when it comes to creating rights. They have constitutional power only to resolve concrete cases or controversies. They do not have the flexibility of legislatures to address concerns of parties not before the court or to anticipate problems that may arise from the exercise of a new right. Today's decision, for example, create serious questions about religious liberty. Many good and decent people oppose same-sex marriage as a tenet of faith, and their freedom to exercise religion is, unlike the right imagined by the majority, actually spelled out in the Constitution. Respect for sincere religious conviction has led voters and legislatures in every state that has adopted same-sex marriage democratically to include accommodations for religious practice. The majority's decision imposing same-sex marriage cannot, of course, create any such accommodations. The majority graciously suggests that religious believers may continue to advocate and teach their views of marriage. The First Amendment guarantees, however, the freedom to exercise religion. Ominously, that is not a word the majority uses. Hard questions arise when people of faith exercise religion in ways that may be seen to conflict with the new right to same-sex marriage. When, for example, a religious college provides married student housing only to opposite-sex married couples, or a religious adoption agency declines to place children with same-sex married couples. Indeed, the Solicitor General candidly acknowledged that tax exemptions of some religious institutions would be in question if they oppose same-sex marriage. There is little doubt that these and similar questions will soon be before this court. Unfortunately, people of faith can take no comfort in the treatment they receive from the majority today. Chief Justice Roberts clearly anticipated the debate that we are holding in this chamber on this day. We ought to respect the religious beliefs of these agencies that have for decades been simply performing their mission, an extension of their faith, placing children in loving homes. And I'm not going to belabor my comments, Mr. President, but I do want to close by posing a few questions that I hope, if there are others who are going to be speaking in opposition to the bill, that they will provide me with some answers. If it is your position that a faith-based adoption agency that will make referrals of parents when those parents, placement with those parents would conflict with their religious mission, if you are saying that they should be denied the opportunity to access the foster care system by contracting with the state, and if you are saying that tax dollars should not be expended on those agencies, then will you please explain to me the distinction when it comes to foster care parents? Or would you say also that foster care parents who hold similar beliefs informed by their faith should be denied the opportunity to foster children in this state? What about schools that teach these beliefs, that receive an exemption from taxes, which again is a government subsidy? Should those schools lose their tax exemption because they are teaching beliefs that you find objectionable? What about parents raising their own children and teaching them these beliefs? If these beliefs are so toxic and so dangerous, should those parents have their children taken away from them? These are all natural and necessary consequences from a policy that would say faith-based adoption agencies have no right to pursue their mission in accordance with their sincerely held religious beliefs. I read a newspaper column this morning talking about the tension that has gone on for the last several years between this question of same-sex marriage and religious freedom. And the author of the column was urging the legislature to look for common ground and a compromise. Well, I would submit to you, Senate Bill 375 is common ground. It is a compromise. If we pass this bill today, no fit parent will be denied the opportunity to adopt a child, single or married, gay or straight. As long as they are a fit parent, they're going to be able to adopt a child. The question is, do we want to protect the sincere religious beliefs of agencies that have a singular mission, placing at-risk children in safe and secure homes? And if that is indeed, as I said at the beginning, the overall public policy aim when it comes to adoption policy, then we ought to want to move Senate Bill 375 over to the House and through the rest of the process so that it can become part of our state law. Mr. President, with that, I'd be glad to yield to questions if there are any. If not, I'll yield the well.
There are no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair now recognizes Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to this legislation. This legislation suffers from one main fundamental problem. It puts the belief of the workers at the agencies ahead of the analysis of what's in the best interests of the child. The truth is, we have thousands of children in our system who desperately need and want to find a safe and loving home. We need more families who are willing to step forward and grow their families through adoption, particularly for those children in foster care and hard to adopt children like those with special needs or those that are LGBT. Same-sex couples are more likely to adopt than heterosexual ones, and that includes hard to adopt children. This measure discourages those very same people from adopting when our kids actually need more of them to step forward and adopt. It sends the message that the state of Georgia thinks it is perfectly okay to discriminate, which then has a chilling effect on these groups stepping forward. And that can lead, of course, to fewer kids being adopted. It's a slap in the face to same-sex couples who would consider adoption. The only criteria that should matter here, and that the state has an interest in, is whether there are loving parents to provide a safe, warm home and love to a child, the forever home so many kids dream of. Do we think it's better for kids to languish in foster care, to have an ever-lengthening list of kids waiting to be adopted? Because that's what we're saying when we pass this bill. There are other repercussions besides the chilling effect. Businesses don't like it. It sends the wrong message of having an inclusive, open, and tolerant society. Businesses want to support their employees, and they want talent, and they don't often care if that talent is gay or straight. That's why we have letters on our desks from our leading business organizations asking us to oppose this legislation. But it's about a lot more than that. This legislation is personal for me. In 2009, our good friends Keith and Mike got married. This was before gay marriage was legal in Georgia, but the vows they said to each other that day couldn't have been more serious or final for them. Keith and Mike wanted to be dads, and soon after marrying, they began their quest to adopt. To try to stand out amongst the other couples, they made a video called Super Dads to introduce themselves to birth parents. It was professionally produced, and it featured them wearing capes and zooming in as their friends' children got themselves into dangerous situations. As my son Brooks, who was then about 18 months old in the video, headed toward the sharp corners of the coffee table, Mike zipped in with the rubber corners. When one of our other friends' children started opening up the cabinet with the cleaning supplies and the spices and all other things babies shouldn't get into, Mike jumped in with those zappers that keep the cabinets closed. The video closed with a fade out with Keith and Mike surrounded by a large group of us with our children, all of us good friends for years. Keith and Mike were chosen by a birth mother in April 2012 and were present when their son William was born. A group of us, their best friends, went over to their house the night before they were bringing William home from the hospital. We decorated, we put up all kinds of streamers, we left baby necessities and food. See, they were less prepared than they might have been if they were giving birth to a biological child, because you never know when you're going to get the call that someone's chosen you. A couple months after this, my husband Briley and I were honored when Keith and Mike asked us to be William's godparents. We stood beside them at our church, the church we all belong to, when William was baptized. Keith and Mike are amazing dads. They are incredibly attentive and very protective of William. He's a thriving, happy, very active, almost 6-year-old who loves sports and adores his daddies. You could never ask for better parents for a child. And then there are my uncles. My Uncle Jerry and his husband Larry adopted my cousin Chip out of an orphanage in Romania. By the time Chip was brought home to the States out of the orphanage, he was almost 3 years old. The process took a long time. Chip had languished in that orphanage for many months, and the conditions there were so harsh that Chip had been given a diagnosis of failure to thrive. Failure to thrive is when a child, a newborn, doesn't grow or gain weight as they should. And it can happen for a number of reasons, including as a result of emotional deprivation, because of parental withdrawal, rejection, or hostility, or economic problems that affect nutrition and living conditions. In the orphanage, Chip hadn't received enough love and holding and hugs and attention and nutritious food, and he had become listless. But Chip was rescued. My uncles brought him home to America. When they had final adoptive approval, and picked him up to fly him home, the workers at the orphanage put on his body every stitch of clothing that he owned. It wasn't very much. A couple of t-shirts, several pairs of pants and socks, and a snowsuit. There's a video of him when he walked out with the workers, a puffball with every little bit of possessions he had in his life on his body, and into the arms of my uncles. And watching that video, we all cried. This poor, precious child who had experienced a life of deprivation, but no longer. Chip is now a photographer and a college student in Arizona, but his time at the orphanage was not easy, and there are lingering effects from that. For these kids who are in foster care to be able to have healthy, productive lives, the sooner we get them out of foster care and into a permanent home, the better. And if that couple is gay, why does that matter? It certainly is not going to be top of the list for kids who are sitting in foster care or group homes. There are lots of LGBT folks who are much better parents than many straight ones. Whether you're gay or straight doesn't have anything to do with making you a good parent. And see, this bill says that Keith and Mike and my uncles shouldn't have to be treated equally in the adoption process, despite being successful, educated, Christian, attentive parents with many close friends and loving families, that they aren't worth the same consideration as people, as prospective parents, as straight couples are. And the reality is that times have changed. Gay marriage is legal. I understand that that is hard for many people. Cultural change, especially rapid cultural change, always causes some discord. I have some sympathy for folks who grew up under one culture, believing that same-sex relationships are immoral, who have been somewhat suddenly informed that it isn't okay to believe that anymore. But in this context, the mistake they are making is that at heart, this just is not about them. If they work in adoption, yes, they play a role in the process, but it is not about them. It is about finding safe and loving permanent homes for kids. We've had many religious liberty debates in this chamber over the last number of years and about the rights of LGBT folks, and I've never talked about my close friends and family who are gay. But I figured it was time to change that, because really, that's who we're talking about. That's what this is about. This isn't academic. This is about real people and their stories. It's about Keith and Mike hiring a videographer to make a video themselves wearing capes as super dads and lovingly assembling William's crib. It's about my uncles bringing home a tiny 2-year-old in a snowsuit from a dark orphanage in Romania. Those are the people we should be worried about. Mr. President, I'm happy to yield for questions, and if there are none, I will yield the will.
You do have a couple of questions, I think probably friendly questions. Chair recognizes
you.
Senator from the 41st.
Senator, yield for a couple questions.
Yes, certainly.
Is it not true that under present state law, any organization or group who aids in adoptions using their own monies can decide if they wish to serve only heterosexual couples or discriminate?
That's right. As a private agency, And even in the context of LGBT couples, currently, even for an agency receiving public dollars, you are free to discriminate.
And isn't it true there's no bill that says that even using public dollars, we're trying to say that we can't deal with an agency if we feel that's the best agency to service the population we're trying to get adoptions?
I have not seen that legislation, and it is my understanding, and I believe the senator from the 3rd has confirmed, we don't have any examples in Georgia of DFACs declining to contract with any agencies, and that really it stems more from a sort of feeling that some out-of-state agencies have that the contract terms make them nervous. But there are no examples of anyone being driven out of business or having the state decline to contract with them in Georgia. No.
And finally, is it not true that this simply takes it where if all things are equal, we had an agency that was perfectly capable of doing it, and one would serve gay adoptions and one would not, that the department and the staff can't consider that as a criteria, and that may lead to us not picking the one agency or group that would serve the most people the best and assist the most people getting a fair look at their
That's right, and actually brings up another question, is that given limited state taxpayer dollars and the incredibly large charge and difficult work that DFACS tries to do on limited dollars, that this creates inefficiencies within that system in having to pick and choose, allow this there, search for another agency here, and that's another reason I think it's ill-advised public policy, especially when it doesn't actually change the law here in Georgia.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th for a question. 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Of course.
Senator, were you in here this morning when I did my points of personal privilege?
You know, Senator, I was actually up in the center from the 36th office working on my speech, but I did turn the TV on when you were speaking.
Well, I just wanted to remind you and the rest of the senators that in my Black History Month speech, I found out that when white Southern Baptist churches refused to denounce slavery, they split from the Northern Baptist churches and made a concerted effort to keep blacks out of their churches, which brings me to religion. We all may say we are Baptists, but we don't all have the same goal nor the same heart. So we really have to be careful when we start talking about religion. Would you agree with me, Senator?
I agree with you, certainly. That's a very good point, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 29th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
If all the faith-based adoption agencies currently serving children in our state were to close, would we see a reduction in the total number of children placed in permanent homes?
I'm not sure why they would close.
I'm just asking, Senator, if you don't mind, I mean, if they were to close because of a change in policy regarding adoption, would we see fewer children adopted statewide?
It depends on if others came in to fill that work. But I guess I return to the point that given the lack of any actual situation or legal statute currently in our law that this addresses, as far as, you know, same-sex couples being declined to be served, you know, I think it's a hypothetical that really doesn't have a basis in reality.
And will you further yield, Senator?
Of course.
Would you agree with me that it does not require an act of the legislature for that policy to change, that executive branch agency could change their policy, or they could be required to change their policy by court decision? Do you agree with that?
Yes, there could obviously be changes in the law that would that could protect the rights of LGBT citizens, like we've protected the rights of other groups that have been discriminated against throughout our history.
And just one more question, Senator. That change could occur at any time, isn't that right?
It could. I will, though, add that that situation has actually not happened. So,
in Georgia, right? Not in Georgia.
it has not happened in Georgia. So, therefore, you know, this bill, even if we passed it, could also be obviated at the exact same time, much like our constitutional ban against same-sex marriage was obviated the minute the Obergefell decision came down from the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Senator.
No further questions.
Thank
Senator.
you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I would move the previous question on this. We've debated now for over an hour. I think all viewpoints have been adequately expressed.
Senator has moved the previous question. Is there objection? There is objection by the Minority Leader. Chair recognizes Senator on the 41st.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
What would be the posture if I was to make a substitute motion that we do a motion to close debate that would allow 10 minutes on either side? Would that take precedent?
No, does not take precedent.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State your
President.
inquiry.
Would it be appropriate if the Majority Leader would consider that as an option at this time to allow 10 more minutes for a close? We only have, I think, one more speaker. Our whip would like to make a statement and close with his thoughts.
I appreciate the sentiment, but I really believe this has been thoroughly debated in committee for over an hour here. Both parties have had equal say-so, and I just don't believe that I'd like to have my motion heard. You know,
Senator has moved. There is objection by the senator from the 41st. What purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that members of this Senate, if they vote down this motion, we will allow for a full debate of this issue? It is an important issue. We have not been here talking about this for hours. We had other business, and that it would not be a prolonged event. We owe it to the children of Georgia to make sure they're getting the best service from the state as possible, that we should vote down this motion.
Senator has great passion for which he speaks, and the senator from the 46th, the Majority Leader's moved the previous question. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. You're voting on the previous question. Let me have your attention for just a moment, assuming that the previous question is in order. Obviously, that will shut down all debate. We will then go to a vote. As a matter of housekeeping, lunch has been provided in the anteroom. I would ask that they go ahead and set up in the anteroom for the senators to prepare. The Finance Committee will have a subcommittee meeting and then a full meeting on our lunch break. Rules will meet upon adjournment. We still have a number of bills to deal with, and we'll come back after our lunch break to conclude. On the motion of the senator from the 46th, the yeas are 35, the nays are 19, and the motion for the previous question is in order. Question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Port of Committee which fair will pass the bill. Chairs none. Port of Committee is agreed to. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 35 and the nays are 19. This bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. The Senate will stand at ease until 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.